This happened just a few weeks ago. I'm in my last year of high school, and I've lived in Nevada my whole life. There's not much to do around here. But my friends and we've always been into urban exploring. Old buildings, forgotten tunnels, dead malls. Anything that felt abandoned or creepy, that's what we loved. We'd crawl through broken fences, take pictures, sometimes climb up to rooftops or sneak into basements. We weren't trying to break anything or do something illegal. It was all about the feeling, the vibe of forgotten places. And the one guy who always found the weirdest, most interesting spots, that was Charles. He was quiet, a little mysterious, but somehow he always came up with crazy locations none of us had ever heard of. Honestly, I didn't even ask how he found them most of the time. One day, he sent us a screenshot. It was from this weird low-quality Instagram account. Almost no followers, blurry photos, and the comments, creepy, really creepy. The caption on one post just said, "Dozens of abandoned mine shafts in the Mojave Desert if you know where to look." Charles told us he'd been messaging the person who ran the account. They gave him a general area to explore. That's all it took. Charles was hooked. So, that Saturday, it was me, Charles, and our buddy James. I had my Wrangler, which was great for driving in the desert. We didn't have a real address, just a dropped pin on a map, way out in the Mojave. And when I say way out, I mean really far from anything. About 30 minutes after we left the main road, the dirt path we were on barely looked like a road at all. No signs, no buildings, no cell signal. Just miles and miles of desert nothingness. I kept checking my phone even though I knew it wouldn't work. James was getting more annoyed by the minute. He started telling Charles this was a joke, that he'd been tricked by some random account. But Charles just sat there, staring at the map. And that's when things started to get really strange. Charles wasn't ready to give up. He told us to keep going, and honestly, that didn't surprise me. He's always been stubborn when it comes to directions. I figured we'd humor him just a little longer. Then, just when we were about to turn back, James pointed out something on our right. Oh, at first, it looked like the same old rocks and sand we'd been seeing for hours. But when we got closer, we saw a half-collapsed wooden structure tucked into the side of a slope. The entrance looked like it had caved in long ago, but there was still a dark opening just behind the broken beams. It wasn't very big, but it was clearly built by people. It was a mine shaft, a real one. Charles didn't say a word. He calmly took out his phone, opened the offline map he'd saved earlier, and dropped a pin. Then he turned to James and said, "Told you." James rolled his eyes and said, "Charles just got lucky." But honestly, I couldn't believe it either. We had been driving in circles in the middle of nowhere, and somehow we actually found something. I pulled the Wrangler over onto a flat patch of dirt near the entrance. We all got out and started gearing up. Surprisingly, Charles had even brought masks for us, just in case the air inside was dusty or unsafe. As we got closer, the mine looked even worse up close. Charles picked up a rock and tossed it into the opening. We waited. Clang, clang, clang. Then, silence. It was deep. Charles turned to us and said, "If we slip going down, we're not coming back up." Then we began heading in. Luckily, the shaft wasn't a straight drop. It sloped steeply downward, but we could walk it. The ground was rough and uneven. Old wooden beams were still holding parts of the walls. Weirdly, they seemed solid. As we got deeper, it got colder and quieter. Soon, we couldn't even see the entrance anymore. Eventually, the shaft leveled out. We stepped into a wider tunnel with a few paths leading in different directions. It looked exactly like something out of a movie. Dust everywhere, broken rails, scraps of wood and metal, old beams holding up the walls. The air smelled stale, like it had been trapped for years. That's when I realized how helpful those masks really were. We picked a tunnel and just started walking. No one was talking much. We weren't looking for treasure or anything, just exploring. There wasn't really anything special down there. It looked like someone had already taken anything valuable years ago. Then we heard a sound. It was soft at first, from far away, like something being dragged across the ground. I thought maybe I was just hearing things. But then I looked over and saw Charles had stopped too. James waved at us to turn off our flashlights. We did. And now we were standing in total darkness, listening. Then it came again, that same dragging sound, like metal or wood scraping the tunnel floor. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from. The echo made it sound like it was all around us. And worse, it felt like it was getting closer. We stood there in the pitch black for what felt like forever. Could have been 30 seconds, could have been a full minute. None of us said a word. Then, James accidentally hit his flashlight. It blinked on, then off again. I was ready to yell at him. The sound stopped. Everything went quiet. Too quiet. And then, out of nowhere, a loud metallic bang came from somewhere deep inside the tunnel. Like something heavy had just been dropped. And right after that came a sound I'll never forget. It was the most chilling, bone-shaking scream I've ever heard in my life. It didn't even sound human. It was deep, raw, and full of rage. We didn't think twice. We ran. Loud footsteps, didn't care, we just ran. I've never moved so fast. My heart was beating like crazy, and I swear I was seconds away from a full-blown panic attack. I was behind the others, trying my best to keep up. Then my foot caught something and I went flying. One of my shoes flew off, but I didn't stop to grab it. There was no time. I pushed through the pain in my foot and kept running. Ahead of me, Charles and James had already reached the slope and started climbing. I launched myself up the stairs behind them. And let me tell you, climbing up rough wooden stairs with one bare foot was pure agony. Not just painful, excruciating. Every few steps I could feel splinters digging in. If not for the adrenaline pumping through me, I probably wouldn't have made it. When I finally got out and felt the cold air hit my face, I almost collapsed. My foot was a complete mess. James and Charles had to help carry me to the car. There was no way I could drive, so James took the wheel. He didn't wait. As soon as I closed the door, he hit the gas and we sped off. We didn't see anything behind us, but we didn't want to take any chances. The whole ride to the hospital was silent. The pain in my foot was so bad I could hardly speak. I felt like I might pass out. Once we got there, I ended up needing a tetanus shot and had to sit through having all the splinters pulled out one by one. Even after everything was cleaned and bandaged, I still couldn't walk right for several days. A few days later, once I was walking, James told us something. He had dropped his wallet back near the mine. He didn't say anything at the time, but now he wanted to go back. Just to the entrance. Definitely not going back inside. So we returned using the pin Charles had saved. No surprise, the wallet wasn't there. But something else was. My missing shoe. It was lying a few feet from the entrance. I slowly walked up to it and picked it up. That's when I noticed something that gave me chills. My shoe wasn't just dirty. It looked like something had chewed on it. There were actual teeth marks in the fabric, big ones, and whole chunks of it were missing. We didn't wait around after that. We just looked at each other and left. Fast. We still talk about it sometimes, but none of us can explain it. Some people might say it was probably just someone living in the mine, but if that's true, how could they survive down there for so long? And what kind of person bites through a shoe? Whatever it was, we're not going back to find out. There was no food or water anywhere nearby, so who or what could survive out there? Charles even messaged that Instagram account about the location, hoping to find some answers, but he never got a reply. Honestly, after everything we experienced, I don't think I'll be doing any more desert exploring for a long time. I've always been a bit of a tough outdoorsy kind of guy. For me, a real vacation means camping or fishing. Definitely not fancy hotels or busy tourist spots. Luckily, my girlfriend of 6 months, Tiki, feels the same way. That shared love for the outdoors is one of the main reasons we even got together. A couple of weeks ago, we decided to do something different, something we hadn't tried before. We packed up and headed to the desert for a few days of camping. We'd both done forests, lakes, mountains, all that. But the wide, empty stillness of the desert was new for us. We wanted to experience that dry, open silence at least once in our lives. Another big reason we chose that area? The stars. We're both obsessed with stargazing. From the very beginning of our relationship, we'd take late-night drives just to park in the dark and lie back on the hood of my truck to watch the sky. So, when we found out this camping spot was way out there, far from any lights or people, it was a no-brainer. I found the location online. It was public land, legal to camp on but super remote. No bathrooms, no water, no noise. Just the sky, some simple fire rings, and the open desert. It sounded perfect. We loaded up our gear and hit the road early Friday morning. The last stretch of the drive was rough, almost an hour down a dirt road that felt like it would never end. No signs of life. And honestly, that's exactly what we wanted. We reached the spot in the late afternoon. Not a single soul around. The first 2 nights were everything we hoped for. Warm sunshine, cool, breezy evenings, and skies so clear they didn't seem real. We sat by the fire, shared a couple drinks, passed a little joint back and forth, and talked about random stuff. It felt so good being away from everything. And yeah, we had our fun in the tent too. That was part of the magic. But both nights, something felt off. We kept hearing this strange noise, way out in the distance. It wasn't close, but it was definitely there. A long, low sound. Kinda like a howl, but also like a moan. It didn't sound human, but it didn't sound like any animal I knew either. The first night, Tiki looked at me like, "Did you hear that?" I nodded. We laughed it off. I said it was probably a coyote or maybe a big cat. The second night, same thing, same sound, same time. We tried not to let it bother us, told ourselves it was just desert animals we weren't familiar with. It was weird, sure, but we weren't about to let it ruin our trip. Then came the third night. I woke up in the dark. I wasn't sure why at first, but then I heard it. Soft footsteps, crunching lightly on the dry dirt outside the tent. Slow, steady. I froze. My heart was pounding. It wasn't some animal, no way. The steps were too careful, too human. I wanted to grab the flashlight, wake Tiki up, say something, anything, but I just couldn't move. My body was locked up. The steps stopped, just a few feet from our tent. And then, silence. It was the kind of silence that presses in on you. I stared straight up at the ceiling of the tent, barely breathing, just waiting. And then I heard it. Click. That sharp sound of a lighter being flicked. And sure enough, through the thin fabric of the tent, I saw a small orange flame. It was maybe waist high, just to the side. Whoever was out there held the flame steady for a few seconds, then started moving it around slowly, back and forth, almost like they were showing us they were there. Still, I didn't move, I didn't even blink, I just watched. And then the flame suddenly grew. It flared up, like they'd lit something bigger, a torch maybe. My heart dropped. A second later, I heard it fall. A dull thud on the dirt. And almost instantly, the outside of our tent lit up in a burst of light. Heat came rushing in, fast and fierce. In a split second, fire was spreading. That's what finally broke the spell. I shook Tiki awake, and she instantly knew something was wrong. We didn't speak. There wasn't time. We just scrambled. We started grabbing whatever we could, tossing our stuff out of the tent onto the ground. I don't even know if we grabbed everything. We just bolted out of the tent while the fire was spreading fast. Tiki quickly grabbed a jug of water and poured it on the flames, while I stomped on anything that was catching fire. After what felt like forever, we finally got it under control. But half our tent was already destroyed. I grabbed the flashlight and started scanning the area, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever had done this, whoever tried to burn us alive. But there was nothing. No one. At least, no one that I could see. Tiki started packing up what was left of our gear, and I jumped in to help. We didn't even speak. We just started speed-walking in the direction we thought the truck was parked. The problem was, we had no real idea where we were going. There were no signs, no lights, and no clear path. It was pitch black, and we were completely turned around. After about 10 minutes of walking, I heard it again. That same awful scream from the first 2 nights. Only this time. It didn't stop, it just kept going. Long, painful, and disturbing, like an animal in serious pain. And then, another scream, from a different spot, and then another. It was clear, they weren't alone. Whatever they were, there were more than one. And they were behind us. I didn't say a word, I just grabbed Tiki's arm and picked up the pace. Somehow, miraculously, we found the truck. I don't even remember how. We basically threw everything inside and I jumped into the driver's seat. I started the engine and tore out of there. But I couldn't go too fast. The road was rough, and it was pitch black except for my headlights. Every bump felt like it might flip us. I kept pushing forward, praying we'd make it to the main road without crashing. Finally, we hit pavement. I didn't stop speeding until I saw other cars again. Ticky was being strong, but I could tell she was barely holding it together. She looked like she wanted to cry, and I didn't know how to comfort her. I felt like I failed her. We did report everything to the police, told them every detail. But all I can think about is, if I hadn't been such a light sleeper, we both could have died out there, burned alive in the middle of nowhere. That night changed everything for me, and that's exactly why I need to tell you what comes next. It'll make more sense with this in mind. I've always had a weird feeling about my mom's past. I don't mean I thought she was hiding something bad, it's just she never talks about it. She was born in Mexico, lived there as a child, and then moved to the U.S. on her own to go to college. That's the official story. After that, she found work, met my dad, and has lived here ever since. But I don't know much about her life before she came here, and I can't shake the feeling that it's on purpose. Whenever someone asks her about her past, she either cracks a joke or changes the topic. I always thought it was because she had a hard childhood. That's what my dad used to say, and I believed it, at least when I was a kid. But as I got older, I started noticing how skillfully she avoided certain questions, especially at family dinners or holiday gatherings. She had a way of dodging that was almost trained. What little I do know is this. She grew up in a border town in northern Mexico, right along the Texas line. It didn't have the best reputation. Typical border town issues, from what I've heard. The only time I ever heard her joke about her family, she said something like, "My dad's side were politicians. My mom's side were the criminals, but I never knew who was who." I used to laugh along. Thought it was just a dark joke, but now I'm not so sure. Her father worked for the government, supposedly in some high-up role. She never talks about her mother, not once. It's like she didn't exist. There's only one name I've ever heard connected to that part of her life. I won't say it here, so let's just call him R. When I was about 10 or 11, I got up late one night to use the bathroom. As I passed by the living room, I heard my mom speaking softly. It was in Spanish, which I don't understand, but she said R's name several times. And the way she said it didn't sound like she was talking to him. More like she was talking about him, in a serious, almost emotional way. Not once. It's like she didn't exist. There's only one name I've ever heard connected to that part of her life. I won't say it here, so let's just call him R. When I was about 10 or 11, I got up late one night to use the bathroom. As I passed by the living room, I heard my mom speaking softly. It was in Spanish, which I don't understand, but she said R's name several times. And the way she said it didn't sound like she was talking to him. More like she was talking about him, in a serious, almost emotional way. All the lights were off in the room, so I couldn't actually see her at first, but I could definitely hear her voice. Even though I knew it was just my mom, I was still a little scared of the dark back then, so without thinking, I flipped the light switch on. She didn't jump or act surprised. No reaction at all to the light. It was like she knew I was going to be there. She just calmly ended the phone call and turned to look at me, with this sharp, serious stare I had never seen on her face before. It was intense. She told me firmly to go back to bed. So I did. And that's it. That's the full extent of what I know about my mother's past. Just a few odd details. A strange joke, her dad's mysterious job, and the name R. That's all. But what I'm about to share happened nearly a year ago, and I've been thinking about it nonstop ever since. I was born and raised in Arizona. It's always been home. At the time, I was about a year out of college, just getting used to life after graduation. I was driving alone through the desert, headed to catch up with one of my old college buddies. It was a long, boring drive, hours of road and nothing but sand and sky. I was bored of music and didn't really feel like listening to a podcast. So I started scrolling through my contacts and calling friends. Just anyone I felt like talking to. Even a few girls I'd been chatting with. After a while, I decided to call my mom. We both loved soccer, and there was a big Champions League week coming up, so we were deep in conversation about all the exciting matchups. She knows the game better than most people I know, and we can talk for hours about it. That's when I noticed something strange ahead of me. 2 pickup trucks were stopped in the middle of the road, blocking the path. It didn't look like an accident. They weren't damaged, just parked there. I wasn't sure what was going on. Maybe someone needed help? I slowed the car as I got closer. My mom was still on the phone, but I hadn't told her what was happening yet. I brought the car to a full stop, unsure if I should get out or just wait. Before I could decide, 3 men jumped out of the 2 trucks, and every single one of them had a gun. Everything inside me froze. Then I noticed another vehicle behind me, coming up fast. It stopped a short distance behind my car. I realized I was trapped. I wasn't armed. I had no way to fight back. All I could do was try to stay calm and not do anything stupid. One of the men walked right up to my door and tapped the glass with his gun, motioning for me to step out. The other 2 hung back but stayed alert. I slowly raised my hands and got out of the car. The guy in front started yelling in Spanish. I didn't understand a word. Not being able to speak Spanish, my own family's language, felt like the biggest failure of my life in that moment. I'm Mexican American, and I've always regretted not learning the language. But now, it felt worse than ever. I couldn't even understand what these men were saying to me. I couldn't ask questions. I couldn't explain myself. I couldn't even beg. But even without knowing the words, I could tell what they wanted. Within minutes, I was standing there with nothing. No phone, no keys, no wallet. They took everything. And the worst part, I was completely alone, standing in the middle of the desert with no way to call for help or even figure out where I was. A few seconds later, one of the men climbed into my truck, and that's when everything changed. That's when I remembered. I'd never ended the call with my mom. Since the engine was still running, the Bluetooth was active and she was still connected. I watched through the driver's side window as the man leaned forward toward the dashboard screen. It looked like he was about to end the call, but then he stopped. His hand hovered over the button before pulling back. He just stared at it for a second, then leaned in again, this time, like he was listening. That's when it clicked. He could hear my mom, and my mom was still talking. I watched him carefully. A few seconds later, I saw his mouth start to move. He wasn't just listening, he was speaking. They were having a conversation. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could see it. They were talking back and forth in Spanish. And I swear, on everything, I could make out one name. R. I couldn't hear the words, but I could tell he repeated it, just like my mom had years ago. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He kept repeating it, like he was trying to confirm it. Eventually, The other two guys must have noticed something strange because they left their posts near me and walked up to the truck. The man inside rolled down the window and said something to them. All three of them looked at me at the same time. They didn't look angry. They didn't look confused either. Just thoughtful, like they were trying to figure something out. They stood there, talking for another moment before the one in the truck ended the call. Then the three of them walked back over to me. I held my breath. But instead of threatening me, they handed me my things. My phone, my wallet, my keys. The only thing they kept was the cash inside the wallet. As one of them handed it back to me, he looked me in the eye, gave a little grin and said, "Tax," in a thick accent. I've never felt more relieved to lose money in my life. I got in the truck, started it up, and drove away fast. I didn't look back until I was a mile out. All three vehicles, the ones blocking the road and the one behind me, had turned off the road and were speeding deep into the desert. Gone. My first instinct was to memorize their license plates, but none of the cars had any. Just silence. I was still in shock, but I called my mom back after a few minutes of driving. I didn't waste time. I asked her straight up what just happened. She calmly told me that she had simply threatened to call the police on them. She said she was tracking my location and knew where I was, so she warned them to let me go. I called that out immediately. It didn't add up. These weren't random punks. These were serious guys, armed, organized, and clearly experienced. No way a casual threat would have changed their minds. But she stood by her story, said she had been pleading with them in Spanish, asking them to let me go. I didn't buy it, but there was nothing else I could do in the moment. I asked her to report it to the police for me, and she said she would. We ended the call soon after, and I drove the rest of the way in total silence. No music, no calls, just me and my thoughts. For a long time, I tried to forget it ever happened. But the more I think about it, the more convinced I become that my mom had connections, serious ones, maybe to something dangerous, maybe something that never ended when she left Mexico. I don't think I'm imagining it anymore, and I don't think she expects me to believe her forever. At some point, I feel like I have to ask her the truth, but deep down, I'm terrified. Not just of her answer, but of what I might be stepping into if she decides to finally tell me.